All right. Well, Shabbat Shalom, everybody. All right. Good to good to be in the house of God on the Sabbath day. Of course, those of you, before I forget, that are watching on YouTube, by all means, I've been trying to make this announcement a number of times. Please, 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 if you don't already have it on your phone or your laptop, get Rumble. Get an account with Rumble. Follow us on Rumble, Besar Shalom, Florida, because all of these messages on YouTube are also being made available on Rumble. Eventually, if YouTube decides they don't want us on their platform anymore, we'll be on Rumble, so everybody will know where to go. And also, there are a number of messages that YouTube will not allow. They are currently on Rumble. So check those out as well. Now, this message, of course, is part 4 in the volume on illegal immigration. So this is part 4. Then next week we'll do a special message, getting ready for Purim. In 2 weeks we'll come back to this. It'll be part 5, which is the final part, and we'll give a biblical response. Then I'm going to have everybody get on the Passover train. Or about a plane. You know, Department of Transportation is doing really well with that lately. And yeah, so we'll get on plane, and I'll have everybody get on the Passover plane, right? Tray tables up, seat belts buckled, electronic devices off, right? And I'll get you on the runway. We're going to make ourselves down that runway and get ready for the Passover. So when the Passover comes, it's takeoff, right? Then, when the Passover is done and it's over, and we say goodbye to the Passover, we'll come back to our critical issues series, and we'll start in with volume 12 of the 13. Now, volume 12 will give you a hint. Some of you, I think, know already. I might have leaked it out, but you know, obviously, everything is being geared towards a one world government. That's what the Bible even clearly says, right? It's a one world government being led by the Antichrist. So we know where this thing is headed. Well, in order to have that government in place, where you will own nothing and be happy, right? I mean, there has to be a vehicle that's put in place in order to take everything from you. So you won't have your own house, you won't have your own private property, right? There's got to be something, some kind of an emergency where all of those things have to be consumed by the government. I wonder what that'll be. Well, we'll discuss that when we get to volume 12. So we focused thus far on the first 3 lessons here, the evils that are being perpetrated when it comes to, and I'm not talking about immigration, but illegal immigration. There are forces at work that are trying to, and doing rather well, may I add, trying to divide us so that we're not one nation under God, indivisible with liberty and justice for all. No, it's a land of tribalism where we're actually judging people based on the color of their skin. And that's what's being perpetrated now. Division. Satan is into division. If he can divide your marriage, if he can divide your home, the workplace, the church, the shul, a nation, if he can divide, then he can conquer. But that's not the only thing that Satan's involved in. Not only does he want division, he wants you to suffer. Pain and misery and woe. That's what Satan's all about. So the southwest border is truly a humanitarian disaster. And they understand this is exactly what they want. It's been politically manufactured. And when I say politically, I'm not talking about just politicians here. I'm talking about outside the country. Okay? There are forces not only in this country, outside the country, that want to destroy this land Because once again, this is the country that has sent out more evangelists and have spread the gospel than all the other countries combined. If you can take down this one, what does that do to the gospel? So it's very easy to point the finger at Joseph R. Biden. That's very easy. And granted, he has removed the door. There's no debating this. But trust me, folks, the Communist Party has been at work for decades taking the hinges and locks off of that door. He just took it off. Our failures to secure the southwest border stretches farther into this country than you can imagine. As of this date, this is February 25th, if I'm not mistaken, 2023. What is the number one cause of death among 18 to 45-year-olds? Anybody? Fentanyl. Fentanyl. 18 to 45-year-olds. Number one. The ebook, The Specter of Communism, which specter? It's a spirit of Antichrist, reads, from 2000 to 2018, at least 300,000 Americans died of opioid overdoses. Now, that's 18 years. Folks, in 2022, 1 year, there was 200,000. In 1 year. Fentanyl is a synthetic opioid that is 50 times more potent than heroin and 100 times stronger than morphine. It is so deadly that it has been called a chemical weapon. 2 milligrams can be fatal, yet such destructive drugs are flooding American streets at a terrifying pace, killing many more people than other opioids, simply because it's so easy to overdose on them. According to the National Institute on Drug Abuse, among the approximately 67,000 deaths from drug overdoses in 2018, about 31,000 were due to fentanyl and its analogs. The trafficking of fentanyl from China has been widely reported. In 2018, authorities performing a routine inspection at the Port of Philadelphia discovered and seized 110 pounds of fentanyl in a shipment of iron oxide from China. The street value of the drugs discovered was $1.7 million. In 2017, more than 70,000 people died of a drug overdose in the United States, of which more than 40% were related to synthetic opioids, mainly fentanyl and its analogs. These drugs are primarily produced in China and then enter the United States through the U.S. Postal Service or are smuggled in via the U.S.-Mexico border, end quote. That's almost comical. I can't even get my dad a Father's Day card through the U.S. Postal Service, but they're finding a way to get the drugs through. But really, when you think about it, right, if you're going to break into a house, is a burglar going to crawl in through a second-story window or walk in through the front door? We've made it real easy. And so the question begs, why hasn't the border been closed? Scott Erickson of the Daily Signal writes, specifically, transnational criminal organizations have exploited the chaos along the border and allowed portions of it to become a superhighway for various contraband and illicit drugs to pour into the nation. These cartels have quickly taken advantage of our overwhelmed border patrol. Our border patrol has performed valiantly in the face of an unprecedented surge in irregular migration, but its resources are being stretched far too thin, end quote. Isn't that amazing? The resources are stretched so thin for the Border Patrol agents. But we have 500 million this week we're sending over to Ukraine, in addition to the 100 billion that has already been sent. But no additional monies for the border. If I didn't know any better, I'd swear, man, you're purposely trying to destroy this thing. We can send money, we can send water, we can send medical supplies and everything to Ukraine. Can't get any to East Palestine for some reason. Kind of makes you wonder. NBC News recently reported federal agents in the El Paso sector have seen a 4,000% increase in fentanyl seizures over the past 3 years. Federal agents seized, get this, just 1 pound in between ports of entry in all of 2018. 1 pound. In the first 6 months of the Biden administration, those same agents have seized 41 pounds. 1 pound in a year, 41 pounds in 6 months. It is increasingly being incorporated into other illicit drugs, providing cartels a cheap and potent means to increase drug production and financial gain. Tragically, incorporating fentanyl into other illicit drugs has also fueled an increase in overdose deaths. Unsuspecting users are often ingesting a fatal dose of fentanyl, along with whatever other drug they were intending to consume. So again, the devil's not about just dividing us. He wants suffering and misery and dependency and woe and homelessness. And that's where communism always goes. The opioid crisis has affected hundreds of thousands of Americans in recent years, with tens of thousands dying every year to overdose. While earlier attention was paid to the role of prescription opioids within the context of the crisis, the rise of illicit fentanyl and its nefarious introduction to other illegal drugs, including methamphetamine, cocaine, counterfeit pills, has emerged as the true driver of this crisis. While the number of overdose deaths involving prescription opioids has been declining, it has been offset by a staggering increase in overdose deaths involving synthetic opioids, primarily fentanyl. In recent years, transnational criminal organizations in Mexico have begun producing fentanyl themselves and smuggling it directly into the United States. This has resulted in local communities of all sizes within all 50 states struggling to provide outreach and services to those afflicted with addiction. If you want to really be shocked, you can go to YouTube and just plug in there homeless Philadelphia, the Tenderloin, or Oakland, or San Fran, LA, and you will see videos where people just drive down streets just with their phones or cameras. And you look at these people and those are human beings. And it looks like a zombie movie. And it's like, no, that's not a third world nation. That's like Oakland. That's Philly. That's America. That's not some third world nation. And they're walking around like it's a zombie movie. Bent over, sleeping on the streets. Now taking over airports. The El Paso airport, O'Hare airport in Chicago. Huge homeless encampments just taking over. Doing their drugs in the airport. Now, you've heard, I was reading exactly how the article goes, and it was talking about overdose. Wrong. You can have a prescription perhaps for anything, right? Like a sleeping pill. You can overdose on it if you take too many. That's not what's happening. You've got like college kids that, hey, they're trying to study for an exam, right? The next day or what have you, and they pop something, hey, just to keep me awake, and they're dead. So that's not an overdose. That's called murder. They're being poisoned. They're being poisoned. Why isn't the border closed? They're being murdered. And we have a wide open border. Chuck Holton of the Federalist writes, fentanyl is the most powerful painkiller on the market. It's 100 times more potent than morphine. Says James Miller, director of Community Corrections Program in Raleigh County, West Virginia, only 2 milligrams of fentanyl can be lethal. In 2021, U.S. Customs and Border Protection seized more than 11,000 pounds of fentanyl in the United States in 1 year. By the way, that's enough to kill 2.5 billion people, a third of the planet, is coming across the border in 1 year. Why isn't the border closed? The drug is being laced into less potent drugs like marijuana and heroin, often without the knowledge of the user. The source of the fentanyl flooding America's streets might come as a surprise. According to data compiled by the Drug Enforcement Administration, illicit fentanyl is primarily manufactured in China and smuggled in the United States through Mexico. Some say this should constitute an act of war. Gordon Chang says we should consider each of those deaths a murder because China wanted Americans dead. He says China knows exactly what's going on. So when they sell fentanyl, you have to assume this is Communist Party policy. And by the way, these fentanyl gangs are operating not just on the southern border, but on the northern border as well, says Chang. These experts fear fentanyl may prove to be our adversary's most powerful weapon, defeating America from the inside out. We won't have to fire a bullet. They'll kill themselves. Quote, Chang says, every time someone says fentanyl, we should be saying China. Unfortunately, that's not the case. Miller says if our enemies can destroy our youth who fight our wars, then they've already won the battle. Satan is about division, and Satan is all about misery and woe and pain and suffering and addiction. You are seeing a country that is turning into a nation of slaves. Crime groups have gained complete control of the Mexican side of the 1,950-mile border, directing the flow of both migrants and drugs, says Victor Avila, former supervisory special agent with Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE. Remember, ICE, that's the ones, remember, Black Lives Matter said we need to abolish ICE. They specialize in human and narcotics trafficking. The smugglers make their way across tough terrain to one of hundreds of stash houses located near roads in the border region. The drugs are then placed in cars and driven through often unguarded checkpoints and across the country. The cartels control Mexico, all of it, says Avila. The former ICE agent who survived gunshot wounds in an ambush with a cartel, they are running a parallel government. And in Mexico, you can't be a policeman. Because in Mexico, the cartels, they know who the cops are. And so guess what? If you don't work with us, your entire family, you will find their pieces all over Juarez. Cochise County Sheriff Mark Dano says 220 people a day are dying of drug overdoses, just in that county. The sheriff said, citing a national figure, and then you look at the fact that 90% of all the illicit drugs in this country come through our southwest border. With that alone, we should be securing this border. Plus, there's a constitutional mandate that we should have a secure border. And right now, I'm worried about that. These are men that put their hand on a Bible, raised their right hand, swore to uphold the Constitution. Didn't even get the hand off the Bible, they're already breaking it. John Binder, the Federalist, writes, Customs and Border Patrol announced in 2022, just last year, that Southern Texas has experienced a 1,066% increase in fentanyl seizures in the past year. Agents at 8 ports seized 87,652 pounds of narcotics, including 588 pounds of fentanyl. The surge in fentanyl has been so dramatic that the Drug Enforcement Agency, DEA, issued its first public safety report in nearly 6 years. The report shows that 4 out of every 10 pills containing fentanyl carry a lethal dose. This is a 48-hour report. In 48 hours, Border Patrol on December 12th seized $97 million worth of narcotics. in 48 hours. That's the ones they seized. Imagine what got through. United States Border Patrol Chief Raul Ortiz. Folks, this is a 3-day report he gave. Just 3 days. Not 3 weeks, 3 days. Ready? 131 pounds of fentanyl, 26 pounds of heroin, 13 pounds of crystal meth, 22 water rescues. People trying to get across the rivers and they almost drowned. 18 large groups totaling 2,446 migrants, 3 gang members, MS-13, 1 assassination attempt, and 10 sex offenders. So imagine, these are people, they got into the country, they raped women and children, we caught them, we deported them, and our president says, come on back. Sex offenders. In a July 2021 report, quote, the Federal Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE. Remember, we don't need ICE. ICE said that it had arrested, in the first 6 months of the Joe Biden presidency, 300 illegal immigrant sex offenders. As part of an ongoing operation. Agents arrested 302 sex offenders as part of the agency's Operation SOAR, Sex Offender Arrest and Removal, according to the agency. Do we really need ICE? Our officers have prioritized the arrest of non-citizens who pose the greatest threat to the security and safety of our communities, Acting ICE Director Tay Johnson said in a statement about the arrests. Johnson said that ICE focused its resources on those who have committed sex crimes and demonstrated predatory behavior, and reinforces our steadfast commitment to enhancing public safety across the United States. Why isn't the border closed? I guess, hey, it's not my wife, it's not my children, it's not my grandchildren. Who cares, right? So we got drugs. We've got cocaine, we've got heroin, we've got crystal meth, we've got fentanyl, we've got what else? Oh, human sex trafficking, right? Got that. We got sex offenders coming across. What else could we? I know, terrorists. How about terrorists? The terror watch list, apprehensions on the southern border. So what they did, terror watch list, is they broke it up. They broke it up by years. So you have the 4 years of the Trump administration, then 2021, and then 6 months into last year. Here are the numbers. Fiscal year 2017. These are the number of terrorists that were apprehended at the border trying to get into our country. First year of the Trump administration, 2. Okay, 2017. 2018, 6. 2019, 0. Because they started building the wall. 2020, 3. So his 4 years, there were 11. Ready? 2021. Now Biden's president. 15. The first 6 months of last year, 50. "65 terrorists have been apprehended in just 18 months. Those are the ones they caught. I'm sure they're just looking for work. So we got human sex trafficking, we got sex offenders, we got fentanyl, we got cocaine, we got heroin, we got crystal meth, we got terrorists. Woo! It's a good thing we have a reliable media to report this stuff to us. Breitbart. Rich Noyes did a study for the Media Research Center, or the MRC. Quote, the illegal immigration influx along the U.S. southern border has worsened every month since President Biden took office, but the liberal broadcast networks have essentially stopped covering the crisis. The report continued, but while the reality along the border is worse than ever, coverage of the crisis on the ABC, CBS, and NBC evening newscasts has slowed to a trickle. Just 4 minutes and 20 seconds for the entire month of July, including weekends. Down an astonishing 96% from the Biden-era peak of 113 minutes in March. And on August 12th, when the terrible July border statistics were released, none of the 3 broadcast evening newscasts bothered to even mention them. Man, it's almost like they're hiding the story. Noyes added, they don't say it flat out because it's illogical to say someone violating the laws has a civil right to do so. But they do have tremendous sympathy for one side. And it's all about the well-being, the human interests of those who are trying to come across. And shows very little about the consequences to the nation or the American people. The TV networks largely ignore the concerns of Americans, Noyes said. Media coverage is organized around the plight of those who would immigrate and doesn't really distinguish between legal and illegal. He added, for the TV networks, the immigrants are always the good guys. There are no bad immigrants. And if you ever do see these networks show, they always make sure to show women and children. The problem is, and the Border Patrol agents will tell you, that's not exactly what's happening. You have adult males coming across anywhere from, and the ages are from 18 to 35. Those are the adult males, the males that are coming across. So it's not women and children coming. No. Imagine if you were a Border Patrol agent and you had to don that uniform every morning, or if you're working late shift, you're putting the uniform on, you put the belt on, you get the gun ready, right? Because you're trying to protect your family. You're trying to protect your children. You're trying to protect your neighbors and their children and their families and your community. And you're putting your life on the line every single day. And the very thing that you're trying to protect, Washington is trying to destroy. What would it do to you? Quote, the overwhelming flood of illegal immigrants and the lack of tools to do their job has allegedly crushed the morale of U.S. Border Patrol agents. Members of U.S. Customs and Border Protection claim that the Biden administration has handcuffed their agents, which in turn has reportedly demoralized the agents, trusted to protect the borders of the United States. More morale is in the toilet. John Affinson, spokesman for the Border Patrol's union, told the Washington Examiner, quote, morale is low because agents aren't allowed to do their job. If our job is to be out patrolling the border in between the ports of entry and actively searching for people who have crossed illegally, but we're not allowed to go do that job, it basically creates this defeated feeling in everyone. That's what Satan wants. He wants misery and woe and discouragement and death. Thomas Feely, senior official at ICE for over 25 years, and is in charge of removal operations in the state of New York, quote, after 30 years of government service, it's time to move on. With the current administration doing everything they can to cripple EROs, which means enforcement and removal operations, endangering the American public, and not enforcing the laws passed by Congress, I don't want to be a part of that. As a member of the Senior Executive Service, a service entrusted by the public to ensure whatever administration is in charge follow the law, we currently are not. We fight and argue every day about not arresting or releasing horrible criminal aliens to the street. Quite frankly, is disgusting, end quote. Imagine, you caught them. You caught the sex offenders. And the government says, no, let him go. So what you are seeing is a nation being built. As a former president said, we're going to fundamentally transform the United States of America. They're doing it. They are turning this nation into a nation of slaves. Slaves that are going to be dependent on welfare, government checks, and drugs. Because as long as I can keep you dependent on me, then I'm the master. In closing, Joshua Moravchik wrote a book, it's a good one, Heaven on Earth, The Rise, Fall, and Afterlife of Socialism. He writes, to be sure, America has not always been loved. It has been a target of resentment, even hatred. American leaders have been pelted with eggs and stones in foreign capitals by protesters venting their rage at the behemoth of supposed imperialism. But it is doubtful that these demonstrators have often represented more than small minorities. To millions of others, America has presented a picture of freedom and abundance. It still attracts about 1 million legal immigrants each year, while an even larger number gets turned away, attempting to enter without authorization. Some thousands of unauthorized immigrants succeed at entering, arousing political controversy. Many millions more who do not pull up roots to try to become Americans are nonetheless drawn to the images of American life, real or fanciful, in television, cinema, sport, fashion, food, and music that dominate pop culture around the world. This great allure was deeply subversive of the socialist consensus that had been gathering elsewhere around the world for much of the 20th century. Like Napoleon's failure to conquer Russia, socialism's failure to conquer America proved its undoing. It's a good book. It's a little dated. So, with all due respect to Joshua Moravchik, the old saying goes, if at first you don't succeed, try again. And so instead of trying to persuade Americans to adopt socialism, and remember, whenever socialism gets in, it always leads to communism. Always. And if you don't believe me, ask Canada. Because Canada, we love our socialism, really now. Instead of trying to persuade Americans to adopt socialism, now they're going to force it. Father, we just come before you. Certainly this message, and those that are in the room and those listening to this message on the internet, it's not as if we're just going to get out there and change the world. And that was really not the intent of the message. It is to totally and completely understand what is happening, why it's happening, and who's behind it. Help us, Lord, as believers. We are to look at things from a heavenly perspective. And we may see an open border, and we may see evil cartels and wicked politicians that are allowing all of this. But understand, and help us to understand, this is a spirit at work. It is a spirit of Antichrist that is operating now through people in order to build a new nation, a different nation. It's not the American experiment, what the founders wanted. No, this is a different America. We have to understand that, Lord. You have to understand what's happening, why it's happening. Lord, I pray, so many people, all these drugs are coming in. They're going to be very cheap. And people will try them, and people will get addicted. Lord, it should break our hearts when we see in New York where they're opening up offices now, giving the drug addicts clean needles so that they can shoot their illegal drugs. Lord, that is what we have become as a nation. It is certainly not your design. It's certainly not the founder's design. But that is where we're at. Lord, help us understand these issues. Help us, Lord, to get the word out. As the body of Christ continues to move on day by day towards our eventual salvation with you forever, this drug problem is going to get worse and worse and worse because more drugs are now flowing in. And I pray, not only this congregation, but every church that really calls out your name, that we get prepared for that. There's going to be a lot more addicts out there. There's going to be a lot more broken bodies, many more broken families, children, teenagers that are going to be addicted to this stuff. And as a church, as a body, we better have an answer for that, because it's coming. I want to lift up those agents. Man, Lord, they're donning the uniform every day. And they're going out, it feels like they're fighting a war that they can't win. I pray, Lord, that you protect those men and women, protect their families, trying to do the best they can. I thank you for them. Oftentimes we forget about them just because we don't see them every day. They're trying to protect us. Lord, thank you for that. I ask and pray that you would give them a strength, an extra measure of grace. And it's not just on the border. All those drugs, all those guns, all of it is pouring into all the 50 states. So our law enforcement officers that are out there, Sheriff's Department, Lord, thank you. Thank you for them. They're willing to put their lives on the line every day in a very evil and wicked and violent world. We're not out there. They are. So we pray for them as well and their families. Lord, I pray for our leaders. Those that know what's going on. They know, and they've been silent. Maybe your Spirit is speaking to them and convicting them. I pray that you give them a boldness to stand up. Maybe their political career will be over with. So be it. But at least speak the truth and say, no, not on my watch. Lord, thank you for this day, and thank you for hearing our prayers. May we not get discouraged by all this. This is not our home. This earth is not a permanent place. It wasn't intended to be. Someday you're going to make it all brand new. All of this will just melt with a fervent heat. Help us remember that. So we not just look at the situation, we get so discouraged as a people without any hope. Understand that that day draws nigh. Maybe someday soon. You don't call us home first, we'll hear a trumpet. And after that, the kingdom. Help us keep our minds and hearts on that. We thank you, Lord, for hearing our prayers once again. And we lift up these things, of course, in Yeshua's precious name. Amen.